Today, I want to tell you a story so intense it silenced a town and exposed the true meaning of survival in the Old West. It unfolds in a lonely frontier settlement where wooden buildings creak in the heat, dust swirls through empty streets, and danger always feels one breath away. This was a place where fate, violence, and foresight collided. It all started with a single, strange detail. A man no one understood, and a stone fortress that would soon stand between life and death. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. They used to call him Stone Man, sometimes worse. A muttering loner behind gray rock and iron. Rath Koren was 52 then, hair already turning silver, hands always busy, never idle. His house sat inside walls nearly 7 feet high, solid stone all the way around, sealed by a single steel door he'd forged himself. Folks laughed at it, until that Tuesday in August arrived. I was sweeping the floor of my barbershop when the first shots cracked the air. Bang, 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 bang. I looked up, rushed to the window, and my blood went cold. 20 riders stormed into town, dust rolling behind them like a living cloud. The Draven gang had come to Dusty Creek, and none of us knew that day would teach us what preparation truly meant. Now stay with me. What comes next hits hard. Everyone knew the Dravens. The whole territory whispered their name. Kyle Draven and his brother Ors led them. Men who left towns blackened and empty. 18 more rode behind them, each carrying his own ledger of blood. I watched them pour into the main street. Hooves crushed the flowers Kyle Vint had planted that morning. Kyle rode first, huge, scarred, his face cut like a map of hell. His eyes were dead coal. No light, no mercy. Everyone out! Ors Draven shouted, firing twice into the air. My shop windows rattled like they'd shatter. I stepped outside with my hands raised, neighbors doing the same. Torrin Blythe appeared without his badge, face drained of color. The Dravens herded us into the plaza, over 100 souls shaking under the brutal sun. I stood beside my wife, Vera, her fingers digging into my hand. Our daughters, Sable, 12, and Nyx, just 9, clung to her skirts, eyes wide with terror. "This town owes us hospitality," Kyle Draven said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. His voice scraped like stone on rusted iron. "We're staying 3 days. You'll feed us, give us your best rooms, and keep us entertained." Gold teeth flashed in a grin that made my stomach knot. "Anyone plays hero. We burn this place so clean not even Ash will remember it." I searched the crowd for defiance. There was none. Months earlier, the sheriff had locked away every rifle after a child nearly died. Now we stood unarmed, livestock waiting for the blade. Then one of the outlaws, a thin man they called Hex Var, pointed his filthy rifle down the street. "Boss, look at that." "What in hell is that fortress?" Kale Draven squinted at the stone walls rising at the far end, standing wrong among all the wood. Ulrich Fenn answered before thinking, voice shaking. "That's Rath Koren, blacksmith, paranoid old fool. Built those walls 'cause he's scared of his own shadow." Laughter shattered the air like broken glass. A scared old man? Ors Draven wiped tears from his eyes. "I've got to see this." 10 riders broke away toward Rath's house. The other 10 kept us penned in the square. My gut twisted. I knew Rath. I'd trimmed his beard for 20 years, listened to his quiet stories, seen the weight behind his eyes when the past surfaced. He never chased trouble, never meddled. But once, while I cut his hair, he said something I never forgot. "There are 2 kinds of men, Elon," he told me. "Those who prepare and those who pray." He paused, then added, I do both. God helps men who don't wait, helpless. The riders circled his walls like wolves. Kyle Draven dismounted and slammed his rifle against the steel door. The sound rang through town like a hammer on an anvil. "Open up, old man. Let's see your castle. Our chief needs proper lodging." Nothing answered. Kyle struck again, harder. "Don't make me break this door." Then, after a long, heavy silence, a calm voice came from behind the stone. "This is private land. I respectfully ask you to leave." The outlaws stared. Then laughter exploded. "Did you hear that?" Hexvar howled, nearly falling from his saddle. "He asked us to leave." "The old fool thinks he's in charge." Mulrek Dunn snorted, wiping his eyes. "He must think we're selling Bibles." Cale Draven's grin vanished in an instant. What replaced it was raw fury, carved deep into his scarred face. "Stupid old man," he snarled. "I'll count to 3. If that door doesn't open, I'll break it down and drag you out by your hair. 1. I stopped breathing. The whole town tightened with me. Vera pressed her face into my chest. Sable and Nick sobbed without a sound. 2. Torrin Blythe shut his eyes, lips moving like a prayer. 3. Cale raised his rifle and unloaded into the steel door. The gunfire thundered through Dusty Creek, echoing off every building. Bullets slammed into the metal, leaving shallow dents, nothing more. Not a single round pierced it. The door didn't even shudder. It might as well have been part of the mountain itself. It was like shooting solid stone. Confusion flickered across Cale Draven's face. Then rage swallowed it whole. "What kind of door is that?" he barked. He ordered 4 of his strongest men forward. I watched axes crash against steel, sparks flying with every blow. Rifles barked again and again, leaving nothing but scratches. They even tried a thick log as a battering ram, slamming it into the door until their shoulders shook and their breath came in grunts. Nothing. Rathcorin's door didn't give an inch. The hinges never moved. The wall stood firm, perfectly laid, ancient-looking, as if the land itself had grown around them. After nearly half an hour, the men stumbled back into the plaza, drenched in sweat, empty-handed. Ors Draven wiped his soaked shirt and spoke the truth none of us dared say. "It can't be breached, brother. That place is sealed tight. I've never seen anything like it." Cale spat into the dirt, eyes burning red with restrained violence. "Fine. Let the coward rot in there like a rat. He'll have to come out sooner or later for food, for water. No one stays locked up forever." He turned his gaze on us then, cold and deliberate, as if choosing who would suffer first. "Until then," he said slowly, "you're going to keep us entertained. We've got 3 days to get real familiar." That was how our private hell began. The Dravens took everything, the saloon, the hotel, the stores. They paid nothing, asked nothing. I watched Ulrich Fenn forced onto his knees, pouring whiskey while they laughed and spat near his hands. I saw Torrin Blythe beaten just because one man didn't like the way he looked. Mulrek Dunn walked out of Kyla Vint's store with his arms full while she wept. Hex Var shattered the church windows simply because he liked the sound of breaking glass. That first night was the worst of my life. Screams cut through the darkness. Random shots kept us awake. Drunken laughter echoed like something unholy. I hid in my barber shop with Vera and our girls. We huddled in the deepest corner, praying they wouldn't notice us, praying they wouldn't come looking for amusement. Through the broken window, I could see Rathcorin's stone house. No light, no sound. It stood there like a sealed tomb. "Do you think Rath is all right?" Vera whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me envied him. Safe behind walls that couldn't be touched. Another part feared he'd lose his mind in there, alone, listening to our suffering without being able to help. At dawn on the second day, Cale Draven fired shots into the air and dragged us back into the plaza. His eyes were swollen and bloodshot. Whiskey soaked his breath. "Listen close, you worms," he growled. "We've decided to stay a week instead of 3. We like this town. It gives us everything we need, and you're real obedient." Ulrich Fenn dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "You promised 3 days," he begged. "We don't have supplies for a week. The people are terrified. The children—" A gunshot cut him off. Ulrich screamed, clutching his foot as blood poured through his boot and soaked the dirt. "Next time," Cale said coldly, "it won't be your foot. It'll be your head." My stomach turned at the sight of it. Dr. Ovek Silm rushed forward with his medical bag. But Ors Draven shoved him hard, sending him sprawling. "Let him suffer," Ors said. "Maybe then they'll remember who's in charge." Ulrich writhed in the dust, crying out as blood pooled beneath him. No one dared move. The message was clear. Mercy would be punished. That's when I noticed something strange, something that felt like hope. From Rathcorin's stone house, a thin line of smoke rose from the chimney. The smoke was thin and steady, rising straight into the blue sky like a signal carved by patience. Rathcorin was alive in there, warm, fed, unbroken. He was cooking, keeping his habits, living by routine while the rest of us drowned in fear outside. Hex Var noticed it too. He pointed with a filthy finger and laughed. "Boss, the old man's still in there. Look at that smoke. He's got supplies. He's cooking like the world ain't burning." Cale Draven stared at the stone house, hatred etched into every scar on his face. "Let him rot," he said coldly. "Let's see how long he lasts. A week? 2? He'll crawl out eventually." But I knew Wrath better than they ever could. I remembered seeing him, year after year, hauling 50-pound sacks of flour, rolling water barrels, stacking sealed crates, straw bales, coal for his forge. Always the same steady pace, always alone. He wasn't hoarding out of fear. He was preparing. For months. Maybe for years. On the 3rd day, the siege changed. One of the younger men, barely 20, quick and lean, decided he'd be the one to crack the fortress. Rin Falco. I watched him from my window that afternoon. He moved like a cat, light and confident, a wall climber by trade. He scaled Wrath's stonework like a spider, finding holds where no man should. The others jeered and wagered below. "Go on, Rin," they shouted. "Show that old man who runs this town." Rin was inches from the top, fingers stretching for the edge, when a sound cut through the air. Metal on metal. My blood turned to ice. A hidden panel slid open in the wall, silent as breath. A rifle barrel emerged, precise and steady. One shot, clean, final. Rin screamed as he fell, clutching his shoulder while his body hit the ground hard. He wasn't dead. The bullet had passed straight through, but blood poured freely as he writhed in the dust. "He shot me," Rin howled. "That damn old man shot me." The panel closed again, smooth and wordless, as if it had never been there. The warning couldn't have been clearer. Try to enter, and you die. They dragged Rin back toward the saloon, his screams echoing behind him, a dark trail staining the dirt. Cale Draven's rage was terrifying to witness. His face went purple, veins standing out like cords. "He shot one of mine," Cale snarled. "No one shoots a Draven and walks away." He ordered 5 of his best men to ring the house. "Light it up," he barked. "Walls, windows, everything. I want that place chewed to pieces." Gunfire erupted instantly. It didn't stop. For nearly 20 minutes, rifles roared without pause. A thunder so violent, it felt like hell itself had kicked down our doors. I covered my ears and crouched behind my shop counter, begging God no stray round would punch through the wood. They fired, reloaded, fired again, over and over, until their arms shook and their lungs burned. When the noise finally died, the silence felt heavier than the gunfire. I peeked out and saw bullets skipping off stone, sparks flashing, no real damage done. The steel shutters on Rath's windows were untouched. His chimney was guarded by iron, blocking fire or explosives. Every inch of that house had been planned with ruthless intelligence. "There ain't a weakness," someone muttered. Kaisel kicked the dirt like a child denied his prize. "Coward!" he shouted, hiding like a rat. If he were a real man, he'd come out and fight. But Kael didn't understand what wrath truly was. Wrath Corin wasn't afraid. He was the only man in Dusty Creek who'd thought clearly. While the rest of us trusted luck, kindness, and hope, Wrath had trusted preparation. Every stone he carried, every door he reinforced, every supply he stored, it all made sense now. He wasn't mad. We were, for laughing at him, for calling him paranoid, for ignoring the one sane man among us. That night, horror deepened. Unable to break Wrath's walls, the Dravens turned their rage on the town. Bren Alder's barn went up in flames simply because they wanted to watch something burn. Fire lit the sky like a second sun. I heard Bren's screams as his life's work turned to ash. Cattle bolted in terror. Horses shrieked and broke loose. It looked like the end of the world. Kyle forced the town's women, including Vera, to cook a massive feast while his men celebrated like devils. I watched my wife work in the hotel kitchen, tears sliding silently down her face, hands shaking as she chopped vegetables. The other women looked the same, terrified, obedient, broken. Every one of us was terrified, yet we obeyed. Refusal meant things too awful to imagine. The bandits ate like animals, mouths open, grease dripping, bones tossed onto the floor. They laughed over cruel jokes about how they'd amuse themselves tomorrow. When Torrin Blythe, his face still swollen from the earlier beating, stepped in as one of the men grew too bold with a young woman, the punishment came fast. They beat him so savagely he couldn't walk or speak straight for 3 days. They dumped him in the street like refuse. From the shattered window of my shop, between the chaos and the barn still burning, I kept my eyes on Wrath Corin's stone house. It stood dark, save for that single ribbon of smoke. Silent, unyielding, like an ancient mountain that had watched generations die and never moved. The smoke rose steady and exact, proof that someone inside kept a careful fire, cooked his meals, lived with order and dignity while the world outside collapsed. Wrath was warm, fed, safe, at peace. And I, the barber who once mocked his walls and called him unbalanced, trembled in the cold with my wife and daughters, praying only to survive another night. He was right. I whispered into the dark. Right all along. Vera nodded without speaking. Tears reflected the distant firelight in her eyes. We were the fools, and now we were paying for our arrogance, our mockery, our blindness. The 4th day brought news that shifted everything. Scare Mile, the scout they'd posted on the roads, came tearing into town, his horse foaming, eyes wild. "Boss, Kale," he shouted as he slid from the saddle. "The Texas Rangers are 2 days out. They're coming this way." He gasped as he spoke. An informant in Silver Springs tipped them off. Full platoon. They know about us. Kale Draven roared and slammed his fist into the saloon wall hard enough to rattle glass. Damn it. The Rangers weren't supposed to be here. They were meant to be tied up north. Ors Draven stepped in, voice colder, steadier. Brother, we have to move. Rangers aren't like these townsfolk. They're trained, armed. They know this land. If they catch us here, we'll all be hanging before sundown. A thin spark of hope flared in my chest. The Rangers. Real law. Real justice. I looked at Vera and saw the same fragile hope in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, we would live. Maybe this nightmare would end with the wicked paying for what they'd done. But Cale Draven wasn't stupid. He'd survived this long because he thought ahead. If we ride now, he said slowly, they'll track us easy. 20 riders leave dust you can see for miles. We need a distraction. His gaze slid across the ruined town and stopped, cold and deliberate, on the stone house at the far end of the street. That smile. It turned my blood to ice. That old man in his fortress, Kyle said softly. If we make enough noise trying to break him, the Rangers will arrive to a town under siege. They'll lose hours, maybe a full day. That gives us distance. My stomach dropped. They were going to come at Wrath with everything they had. The one man who'd prepared. The one who'd seen this coming. Now he would suffer because of it. The cruelty of it hit me like a fist. Kyle gathered all 20 men in the center of town, every one of them armed to the teeth. Surround that house, he ordered. Every door, every window. Burn anything nearby that'll burn. If that stubborn old man wants to be a fortress, we'll siege him until he breaks, or suffocates, or loses his mind. I watched them prepare with grim care. Rifles loaded with full boxes of ammunition, torches soaked in kerosene, blades sharpened as if they expected blood up close. And when he finally comes out, Kyle said, his voice low and promising something dark, I'll make him suffer. For every minute he wasted, every humiliation. I'll make him beg. The bandits roared approval, weapons raised high. I wanted to run, to scream, to warn Wrath. But I couldn't move. One step toward that house would have meant death. So I stood there, helpless, watching 20 killers close in on a good man's walls. God, protect him, I whispered. Beside me, Vera clasped her hands in prayer. He's the only truly good one among us, she murmured. Don't let his goodness be paid for with death. She was right. Wrath Corin had never hurt anyone. He wanted only to live quietly, to be ready, to protect what was his through honest work. And now he was about to pay for all of it with his life. Our guilt pressed down on us like a weight. For our cowardice, for our cruelty, for the years we mocked Wrath Corin and left him alone, when we should have been learning from him. The bandits moved with chilling precision, spreading out in a perfect ring around Wrath's house. Each man took position behind rocks, trees, broken fences, abandoned sheds. This wasn't a mob anymore. It was a calculated military encirclement. Cale Draven lifted his arm and shouted an order that echoed through Dusty Creek. Fire at will. 20 rifles answered at once. The noise felt like the world tearing itself apart, a non-stop thunder that rattled my bones and shook my teeth. The shooting didn't pause. Men fired, reloaded, fired again, fueled by rage instead of reason. Bullets slammed into stone over and over, chipping fragments loose but never breaking through. Steel shutters stayed sealed tight, unbent. The wrought iron door didn't shift a fraction. It was like trying to destroy a mountain with bare hands. Still, they kept firing. Harder! Faster! Ors Draven screamed, his voice hoarse. Minutes dragged into eternity. Half an hour passed, then a full hour of relentless assault. Wrath's walls endured it all, unyielding, as stubborn as the man who built them. I watched confidence drain from the bandits' faces, replaced by doubt, then fury. Desperate to achieve anything, Hex Var hurled a burning torch toward the roof. It traced a clean arc through the air, struck the metal tiles Wrath had installed years earlier, and bounced harmlessly away, sputtering out in the dirt. Nothing caught fire. Nothing could. The structure had been engineered for this exact moment. Metal beams instead of wood, layered stone, reinforced mortar, not a single flammable weakness anywhere. Cale Draven was unraveling. The control he'd always shown was gone. His face flushed red, spittle flying as he barked orders. "Bring the dynamite, now." My blood turned to ice. Dynamite. They had stolen 3 heavy sticks from a mining site weeks earlier. Tied together and placed correctly, they might actually bring the walls down. 2 bandits ran to their saddlebags, wiring the explosives into one lethal bundle. Kyle smiled then, a grin straight from hell, golden teeth gleaming. "We'll blow this damned fortress apart," he said. "The old man dies with it. His death will distract the Rangers just fine." They pressed the charge against the main wall. Kyle struck a match and lit the fuse. It hissed and sparked, burning steadily toward destruction. "Everyone back," Kyle shouted. "This'll be big." The bandits scattered for cover. I dragged Vera and our daughters down to the floor of the barber shop, shielding them with my body. Then I heard something I will never forget. Wrath Corin's voice carried from inside the house, somehow amplified, steady and calm, as if spoken across a table. "Kyle Draven." The name alone froze the street. "The Rangers arrive tomorrow at noon," Wrath continued. "You have roughly 12 hours if you leave right now. Every minute you waste on me is one less minute of freedom." The silence that followed was absolute. The fuse kept burning. No one moved. How did he know? How did Wrath know about the Rangers, about the timing, the plan? Cale roared in fury. "He's been listening to us." And in that moment, I understood. The steel shutters weren't only for protection. The stone walls, the elevation, the design. Wrath could hear everything, every word, every plan. Perhaps pipes built into the structure, carrying sound inward. For 4 days, while we suffered blindly, Wrath had been gathering information, patiently, methodically, waiting for the exact moment to strike back without firing a single shot. "If you waste your dynamite on my walls," Wrath's voice continued evenly, "the blast will be seen and heard for miles. The Rangers will change course immediately. They'll catch you before nightfall, I guarantee it." The fuse crackled closer to the charge. "But if you leave now," Wrath said, quietly, "no more fire, no more noise. You might still reach Mexico just like you planned." It was brilliant. Cold. Precise. Perfect. Wrath Corin had turned knowledge into a weapon and aimed it straight at Cale Draven's throat. Wrath Corin wasn't begging them to leave. He was handing them a way out. Clean, logical, and precise. Not born of fear, but of superior calculation. He offered Cale Draven exactly what he needed. A retreat that didn't look like surrender. I saw hesitation bloom in Ors Draven's eyes like weeds after rain. "He's right," Ors said quietly. "We're bleeding time here, fighting stone while the Rangers close in. We've already lost 4 full days. If that dynamite goes off, it'll be a signal fire pointing straight at us." Cale Draven didn't hear reason. His pride was wounded, cut deep by the humiliation of being outplayed by an older man who never stepped outside. "No one makes a fool of Cale Draven and lives proud of it," he snarled. He lunged for the fuse, now burning down to its final seconds. I'll blow this place, even if it kills us all. Time froze. The fuse hissed, just moments from detonation. Then Draven did the unthinkable. He drew his revolver and fired twice. The first shot sliced the fuse clean, snuffing it out inches from the charge. The second struck the dirt beside Cale's boot. A warning, not a miss. "That's enough," Ors said, voice steady but shaking with resolve. "Your pride is going to get us all killed." The old man won this one. We walk away. We live. For a heartbeat, I was certain the brothers would kill each other right there. Kyle turned slowly, murder blazing in his eyes. Then something shifted. The fire drained from his face, replaced by calculation and fear. He looked down the road where the Rangers would arrive, then back at the stone house that refused to fall, then at his men, watching him, waiting. "Damned clever old man," Kyle spat at last. "Fine, we're leaving." He raised his voice toward the house. "But this isn't finished, Rathcorin. One day I'll return and end what started here." Everyone who heard it knew the truth. It was finished. Cale Draven had been beaten, outmatched and forced back by a 52-year-old man who fired a single shot, never left his home, and trusted only the walls he built with 20 years of bleeding hands. The bandits mounted up in frantic silence. 20 men who had terrorized us for 4 endless days now rode like hunted animals, dust flying behind them. Before leaving, Cale turned to the crowd gathered in the plaza. "If any of you speak about this, to the Rangers or anyone else, we'll come back in the night. We'll burn everything. Not even a child will be left alive." Then they were gone, racing toward the horizon as if hell itself chased them. Maybe it was. Their own demons, finally catching up. I stepped out of my barbershop on shaking legs. Dusty Creek lay broken, charred buildings, black beams clawing at the sky, wounded townsfolk tending pain where they could. Ulrich Fenn still bled from his shattered foot. But we were alive. Against all odds, we had survived the Dravens. For a long hour, no one approached Rath's house. It was as if breaking the silence might undo everything. Finally, Torin Blythe, leaning on a makeshift cane, limped forward. "Rath," he called, voice hoarse and cracked. "They're gone. You're safe now." Silence. For one awful moment, I feared Rath had died inside. Heart failed, mind broken. Then came the sound of metal. 1 bolt, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many locks did that door have? The steel door creaked open on well-oiled hinges, and Rathcorin stepped into the gold of the setting sun. He looked exactly as he always had. Clean work overalls, steady posture, clear gray eyes. He surveyed the wreckage, the wounded, the bullet-scarred walls. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't throw our years of mockery back at us. He only asked, with calm concern, "Who needs help right now?" "Durpas." Ovek Silm stepped forward, battered and unsteady. "The mayor's foot needs cleaning immediately. Gangrene's a risk. Kyla Vint has a broken arm. Torin's ribs are cracked. Others are burned, cut, badly bruised." Rath nodded once. "Bring them all inside," he said. "I have supplies, clean water, hot food." And with that, the man we had mocked became the one who saved us all. Slowly at first, then all at once, people began walking toward the stone house they had mocked for years. I stepped inside Rathcorin's home for the first time in my life, and what I saw stunned me. It wasn't a dark bunker or a cold fortress like I had imagined. It was a real home. A carefully lived-in place. Shelves lined with preserved food, sacks of grain, dried meat, neat rows of jars, large barrels of clean water. An iron stove burning steady, filling the space with warmth instead of fear. Wrath hadn't just built a shelter. He had built a life that could last years. There were books stacked in a modest library, tools arranged with quiet precision, even a small indoor garden, green leaves thriving beneath a cleverly designed skylight that let in daylight but offered no access from outside. While Dr. Ovek Silm tended to the injured using Wrath's supplies, I sat with Wrath in his simple living room. Stone walls surrounded us, but woven tapestries softened the space, turning rock into comfort. "How did you know?" I finally asked. Meeting his steady gray eyes, "How did you know something like this would happen?" Wrath poured 2 cups of real coffee, not the weak, bitter brew we drank in town. The rich scent filled the room. "I didn't know when," he said honestly, "or exactly how. But I knew, without doubt, that something would come." He took a slow sip. "Men like Cale Dreven are storms, fire. They move where they want and destroy what stands in their way. The Old West doesn't promise safety. The only certainty is that hard days always arrive." Shame burned my face. "We laughed at you," I admitted. "All of us. I laughed too. We called you mad, paranoid, afraid." Wrath didn't look angry. "I know," he said quietly. "I heard it every day. Stone Man," he recalled. "Children shouting it along my walls. Torrin Blythe thought I was unreasonable. Ulrich Fenn said I lived in fear." He stared into his cup, memories pulling him backward. But I remembered things none of them lived through. When I was 10, a gang like the Dravens burned my parents' town in Kansas. My mother died trapped in the fire, screaming my name. His voice stayed level, but the words struck like blows. My father tried to defend her with his bare hands. They killed him too. I lived only because I was hidden in the stone cellar beneath our house. My chest tightened. I had never known any of this. Never asked. "That day," Wrath continued, "I swore I would never be helpless again. Never trust luck, never depend on strangers to protect what I love." He gestured toward the walls, still scarred from bullets and the failed blast. "Every stone I carried was for my mother. Every metal brace was for my father. This house isn't fear made solid. It's memory turned into action, love turned into protection." Tears blurred my vision. "I'm sorry, Wrath," I whispered, "for the mocking, for being blind." He placed a strong, calloused hand on my shoulder. "There's nothing to forgive, Ilan," he said gently. "You lived in peace. You believed tomorrow would look like today. That kind of innocence is beautiful." His voice wavered for just a moment. "I don't have it anymore. Fear lives in me like a second heart." "But you gave me something too," he added. "A town, honest work, conversations in your barbershop. I didn't build these walls to shut you out. I built them because I loved this place and wanted to keep living among you." The days that followed were filled with rebuilding. True to Wrath's words, the Texas Rangers arrived exactly at noon the next day. Captain Rill Stanton, weathered, scarred by decades of service, walked the perimeter in silence. "I've never seen anything like this," he said at last, resting his hand against the stone. "Not in 30 years. This place withstood a siege that would have flattened a military fort. The planning here is extraordinary." We told him everything. How Rathcorin never fired more than once. How preparation saved a town that had none. How foresight defeated terror. And for the first time since the Dravens rode in, Dusty Creek began to breathe again. Captain Rill Stanton stood before the gathered townsfolk in the ruined plaza, his voice steady but heavy with experience. "What happened here is something I rarely see," he said. When my men reach towns hit by the Draven gang, we usually find nothing left. Ashes, bodies, and people too broken to hope. He turned and looked directly at Rathcorin. You were fortunate to have a man like him living among you. Respect was unmistakable in the captain's eyes. That house, he continued, was more than stone and steel. It became a reason to endure, a fixed point in the dark that told this town's survival was possible. Rath nodded once, clearly uneasy under the attention. Praise had never sat well with him. But I saw something else in his gray eyes. Quiet confirmation. After 20 years of being mocked as the town's odd recluse, he was finally understood for what he truly was. Word of Dusty Creek traveled fast across the territory, spreading like flame through dry grass. Delegations from other vulnerable towns began arriving, not to the mayor, but to Rath himself. They asked him how to build what he had built. Rath didn't guard his knowledge. He shared it freely. He didn't suggest copying his fortress stone for stone. That kind of work took years, but instead designed practical defenses. Stone watchtowers at town entrances, reinforced storehouses stocked for emergencies, underground shelters where families could hide during raids. Not everyone needs what I built, he told a packed meeting. But together, a town can build something stronger than any single wall. During that same meeting, Torrin Blythe, still healing but standing straighter than before, made a proposal that stunned the room. Rath, he said, I want you to be our new mayor. Ulrich Fenn, humbled and exhausted, agreed without hesitation. You thought beyond tomorrow, he admitted. You should lead us. Rath smiled gently and shook his head. I'm not made to govern men, he replied. I'm a builder, a blacksmith, a man who prepares. Let me do what I do best, so others can lead without fear. And that is exactly what followed. Over the next 6 months, Dusty Creek transformed. Rath taught the men how to raise walls that could turn bullets. He showed us how to build water systems independent of the river, how to store food so it would last years instead of weeks. My barbershop gained reinforced shutters I could seal in seconds. The saloon dug a deep basement where families could shelter. The church became a supply depot organized down to the last crate. We were no longer waiting to be victims. We were ready. Vera and I spent long days in Rath's blacksmith shop, helping forge locks, hinges, and metal braces for every important building. One afternoon, while hammering red-hot iron, I finally asked the question that had lingered. Rath, are you ever afraid they'll come back? He paused, then allowed himself a rare, faint smile. Let them, he said. This time they won't find helpless people. They'll find 200 souls who learned the most important lesson of their lives. He was right. Every family now had clean rifles, stocked provisions, and a practiced defense plan. Then, 6 months after the terror, an official notice arrived by government courier. The Draven brothers had been caught in Mexico. Kyle Draven was dead. 3 bullets to the chest during a firefight with Mexican federales. Ors Draven awaited the gallows in a Ciudad Juarez prison. The rest of the gang lay dead, scattered or rotting in cells on both sides of the border. When Torrin Blythe read the report aloud in the rebuilt plaza, the town erupted. Cheers, tears, embraces, laughter born of relief. But Rath did not cheer. Aren't you happy? I asked him quietly. I'm relieved, he corrected, but others will come. They always do on the frontier. The difference now, he added, is that we're ready. That night, the town held a great feast in Rath's honor. Food filled the plaza. Music echoed between newly raised walls. Gratitude was spoken openly. Children who once mocked him now called him Mr. Rath, eyes bright with respect. Women thanked him for their families' lives. Men spoke of his courage, his foresight, his generosity. Uncomfortable with attention, Wrath tried to slip away early. But this time, the town would not forget him. Wrath tried to slip away from the celebration, uncomfortable with praise as always. But Torrin Blythe stopped him gently and raised his glass toward the stars. "A toast," he said, voice steady and clear. "To Wrath Corrin, the man who taught us the greatest lesson of our lives. That preparation isn't madness. It's love, turned into action." The entire town lifted their glasses. To Wrath. To Mr. Wrath. I saw tears glimmer in the old blacksmith's eyes, reflecting torchlight, not tears of pain or sorrow, but of something far rarer. Belonging. For 20 years he had been the outsider. The strange one. The paranoid man obsessed with stone walls. And now, at last, he was embraced as part of us. Not despite those walls, but because of what they stood for. Vera stepped forward and held him in a long, silent embrace. "You saved us," she said softly. "You saved all our lives." Wrath answered hoarsely, emotion held tight in his chest. "You gave me a reason to survive. Without this town, without you, those walls would have been nothing more than a lonely tomb." Time passed faster than I ever imagined. Dusty Creek didn't just recover. It thrived. Other towns sent delegations to study our defenses. Wrath became a living legend across Texas, consulted by sheriffs, mayors, even military officers. Yet he never changed. He remained a quiet blacksmith, always working, always improving, always preparing. His stone house, still marked by the scar from the blast that never came, stood as a monument, a reminder that careful preparation saves real lives. I grew old in that town. My hair turned gray, then white. My hands shook with age. But the memory of those 4 days never faded. The screams, the fire, the fear, and the awe. One prepared man defeating 20 driven by violence. Whenever a new customer sat in my barber chair, I told the story. Not to frighten them, but to teach what I had learned. There are walls that protect the body, I would say, but only foresight protects the soul from regret. Wrath Corrin lived to 83. He passed peacefully in his own bed, inside the walls he built with bleeding hands and unbreakable resolve. He did not die alone. He died surrounded by friends, by a community that finally understood him, by respect earned through sacrifice. At his funeral, the whole town wept. I had the painful honor of speaking at his grave. "This man," I said, voice breaking, "taught us the deepest truth of the frontier. Preparing for the worst isn't cowardice. It's wisdom. Protecting what you love isn't paranoia. It's duty." Wrath's house was never torn down. Dusty Creek turned it into a museum, a place where future generations could touch the walls that saved a town. I took my grandchildren there many times. I showed them the crack from the blast that never happened, the bullet marks, the steel door that never moved. "Remember this," I told them. "In a dangerous world, preparation is the greatest form of love." Now I am 90 years old, the last one left who remembers those days clearly. My memory fades. My hands tremble. My sight weakens. But I will never forget the image of Wrath Corrin stepping into the sunset. Calm as still water, strong as mountains. He didn't just build walls of stone and steel. He built a legacy of foresight, responsibility, and wisdom that changed the West. If there is one truth I know after 90 years, it is this. The world will always bring storms. We can be leaves in the wind, or builders of shelter. Wrath chose to build. And when the wind howls through Dusty Creek at night, I swear I still hear stone laid carefully atop stone, the echo of a man who understood that preparation is never wasted. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.